Welcome to With All Due Respect. This is a podcast for women over 40 who are looking for sane, frank advice about their health and wellness, especially through and after menopause. I'm Amanda Thebe, a personal trainer and nutrition coach, and the author of the best-selling book, Menopausal: How I Learned to Thrive During Menopause and How You Can Too. I'd love you to join me every week as I chew the fat with some fab guests on hot topics that directly impact you. I also know the power of conversation is lost, and there's nothing better than sitting down for a natter with your mate and putting the world to rights. And that's exactly what I'll be doing with this podcast. We'll really get to know my guests, warts and all. I've made it my mission to help you by exploding a few myths and presenting you with plain, simple facts. These inspiring conversations will hopefully empower you to be a healthy, strong, resilient bitch, just like me. Before we get started, don't forget to hit subscribe and leave a review, and then visit me at amandathebe.com. And now let's get started on today's show. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to With All Due Respect. I'm Amanda Thebe, and today I am joined by Dr. Carla DiGirolamo, who is a board-certified reproductive endocrinologist who specializes in women's performance and menopausal health. Carla is also a lifelong recreational athlete. She's a CrossFit Level 1 trainer. She's a nutrition coach, a member of the CrossFit community, also the author of a newsletter that I sign up to and devour every week called Athletic Aging. And it's one of these really great, I have like 3 newsletters on my hit list, and this is one of them. And it's worth subscribing because of the amount of information that I don't know how Carla manages to do, but every week there's a couple of newsletters come out with knowledge, practical solutions, updates from the medical world. That's what I actually get most out of the newsletters, because Carla deconstructs studies that we maybe can't. Fitness, nutrition, wellness, and honestly just goes on and on and on. She's wonderful. I absolutely can't get enough of Carla. I'm always shouting out about her. So welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much, Amanda. That was an amazing introduction. It's so great to be here.
And we also connected recently on a bit of a project that was led by you, and you invited me and a couple of other people on to join you on the MedFit certification. Do you want to talk a little bit about that to start with?
Sure. So MedFit is this really amazing organization that networks fitness professionals. And really, it's any kind of fitness professional, whether it's just overall wellness, health coaches, nutrition, et cetera. It networks them together into certain areas of expertise. Some people specialize in women, in people with Alzheimer's. Other people specialize in other chronic conditions. So they kind of are in different categories by the category of client they may see. And so MedFit provides this network to bring people together, bring clients and providers together. And so they asked me to do a course to teach fitness professionals, other wellness professionals about menopausal women, because menopausal women are different animals. I like to say that we're basically going through puberty in reverse, and that is a big deal. And there's a lot of physiologic change that goes along with that. And if professionals can understand what those changes are physically, they can better prescribe nutrition programs, fitness programs, and the like. So I created this course that basically teaches people about that physiology and those changes, teaches about the menopause experience, which is why we featured you, because you are an expert on that with your fabulous book. And then we go into some practical application of menopause physiology and the menopause experience in module 4, where we talk about, okay, so how do we do fitness programming? What's important? Is lifting weights important? Is hit training important? And we just talk about some strategies to put all that together. We talk about joint care. Joint care is very important. Tissue care is very important, because in this population, recovery is very important. So we talk about that. And then the very last module is about building a successful business within the menopause space, because this is a very growing space. There's, millions and millions of menopausal women all over the world. And that is just growing rapidly as the life expectancy grows. I know it took a dip with COVID, but in general, over the last 100 to 200 years, the life expectancy has increased dramatically. So there's a big population out there that needs this help. So I designed this course to help providers and, people in general who have, a little bit of a base of knowledge. Maybe they've been athletes for many years. Anybody can take this course that has a little bit of knowledge of fitness and nutrition behind them.
It bridges the gap that I know was needed. I was really excited when you told me you were doing this. It was like, oh yes, finally a resource that's actually ethical, it stays in its lane, it's about scope of practice. And I know from being a fitness professional for 30 years now, there's never been a course on menopause. In fact, it was actively not talked about because it was, it's just another phase of your life. Nobody ever said, well, we maybe need to consider the fact that muscle and bone needs to be looked at. Our joints may get sore, we might have like chronic fatigue. We may, there's a ton of different things that were never discussed. And I find it a little bit insulting in my sort of world. And then, of course, when menopause happened to me, it was like I had no knowledge at all. And so then I was like, this is wrong. There's knowledge gaps in too many places. What I love, though, is when you did the course, it's one of their best-selling courses, right? Like it do so well.
It is. It actually, I was told by the MedFit powers that be that actually count the courses, that it was the most successful launch that they had had. It was the most courses that had ever been sold in an initial launch period. So I was pretty excited about that.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to the quality of the course, because I know people were doing it and talking about it and feeling very proud because of the depth of information that's in the course. We'll talk about that. But also I think that we're a growing demographic that is just demanding more. Like menopausal women that come to me are like, I want to work with you because you're menopausal and you know what you're talking about. And I think that we're, as menopausal women, demanding that. We want to be treated respectfully. We want to be treated by someone who at least has an understanding. And, when I did the course, I got 96% and I was laughing. I was like, I should have got 100% really, considering that I'm supposed to know what I'm talking about. But I think I read from the questions wrong. That's my excuse. But anyway, just joking. What I really liked about the course is that I feel like I'm always learning. I'm obviously not a doctor. And a lot of this information was new to me because you talk about this down to like the cellular level. And that was what was like so exciting for me. I had to dig deep into my old nutrition and physiology education to remember what happens. But
yeah, and that's a very challenging part of this whole thing is, because you kind of have to understand some of that basic science to really get, oh, that's why, hormone therapy doesn't fix everything on the planet. Now, we don't talk about hormone therapy in the course, but with physiology, you can see why, X, Y, and Z are happening the way they are. And that will help you to help your clients more. Because if you can really understand what's going on with them, from that cellular level right on up to them sitting in front of you, it just makes you a better provider. And they will pick up on that. People, like you just said, are just starving for knowledge because they're not getting it from their healthcare providers. There are very few healthcare providers out there with menopause expertise. And, when providers don't know what to do, they basically brush off the symptom. It's like, oh, well, you're fine. Don't worry about it. And then that's it. And then your problems don't get addressed. And, that's why people are getting very, very frustrated. But at least if we can target the fitness industry and get them knowledgeable, that's going to make a big dent in the problem.
It's just extra gateways into more information, right? And essentially you're one of the type of doctors that's going to pick up the pieces of the women being ignored or the women being misdiagnosed, mistreated, or even the other side of it, women that have gone down an alternative route for crazy testing and extra supplements and potentially unregulated hormones. It's doctors like you, endocrinologists, that see these women with these like hormonal conditions that are left. And I have a friend who you may know on Instagram called Dr. Carl Nadolsky. He's so good. He's an endocrinologist too. And he just was saying to me, because he's also on this season's podcast, and he just said the amount of women that come to me that have been on, say, pellet therapy, and they're literally a mess. It's ruining their body, but at the time they believe their providers are doing the right thing for them, they don't have enough information to know that some things aren't safe. I'd love you to touch on that. It's a very broad topic, of course, and just the type of things that you're seeing and how women can be better served, I suppose, or how we can sort of know what to look for.
It's so hard because it's an information abyss, and you get narratives from one spectrum to the other, and the extremes are all saying that their way is the only way. That's probably the first red flag, is that if someone is telling you their way is the only way and you need to do this, that's a red flag that, okay, this is probably out on the fringe, because really where it all makes sense is right down the middle. One thing I learned when I was doing this course was that there is something to be taken from each discipline of medicine. So in the course, you probably remember, I went through three disciplines of medicine. Yes, the allopathic route, which is an MD. That's your typical doctor that goes to medical school in the United States, whatever. That's an MD. Then there's the osteopaths, the DOs. They have a little different spin on things. They really take into account the body and its musculature and how it moves. And that's really important. It's almost like it starts to dip into the functionality of medicine. And so that is definitely a perspective that's needed when we're dealing with this stage of life. And then you also have the naturopathic doctors, the NDs, and they look at things even with a little bit of a different lens. And every discipline has something really positive to contribute. And every discipline also has its shortcomings as well. I can speak as an allopathic physician that one thing allopathic medicine is really good at is doing a study. They know how to design randomized controlled trials. They know what level 1, level 2, level 3 evidence is. They know how to do this forwards and backwards and really get good answers to good questions. But the problem is they're good at it to a fault, because then it gets to the point that they can't pour themselves a cup of coffee without a randomized controlled trial. They get paralyzed by needing these randomized controlled trials to function. And not every question in the world can be answered with a trial. So they have a little bit of trouble thinking outside that box and say, okay, we don't have a randomized controlled trial, but what do we know and what can we do? So, and I think the osteopaths and the naturopaths tend to do that a little bit better.
I would say, I mean, this is my bias, but I think they maybe jump a little bit more outside of the box and go more to the fringe, right? So there's got to be
the other extreme.
Yeah. But it's interesting because, in the UK, obviously where I'm from, like the whole naturopathic, osteopathic is considered pseudoscience or alternative medicine. And so I don't know much about that as far as like the US is concerned. I do know that there's good and bad of everything out there. I also know, like from a personal perspective, I had a terrible experience with a naturopath because I came over from the UK and had never heard of a naturopath, and it said doctor. So I was like, oh, I assume this is a doctor that like went to medical school and can help me. And this is like 20 years ago. And I remember going and it costed me nearly $800. And I came away with all of these supplements and I was furious. And I just felt like I'd been conned. And, I'm so skeptical. And I definitely lean more towards the allopathic medicine, purely because I think that I'd rather know what the data says than what you think it should say or what you think it should say. So there's definitely nuance in all the conversation, right?
Yeah, for sure. And, when it comes to supplements and things like that, I think, one thing that women really need to be wary about, and you got to do your homework, is the provider that you're seeing who is telling you to take X, Y, or Z medication. Are they directly financially benefiting from that medication that they're prescribing for you? Because if they are, that is a bias that you need to consider when they are saying, well, you should take these testosterone pellets, and that they have a testosterone pellet factory in the back of their office. Well, maybe there is an FDA approved alternative that you can get for a $5 copay that maybe is better for you. Well, if you have a direct financial interest in the medication you're prescribing, there's a bias there. And I think that is something that women need to scope out a little more than they do, because I think people assume, like in allopathic medicine, that is really hard to do just because of the way things are regulated. Most of us write a prescription, goes to the pharmacy. We don't gain any financial
kickbacks or anything.
Yeah. We don't gain from that. But in other disciplines, that's less common. And, these voodoo concoctions are created. And, some of them may be creating them as part of their office and their practice. And so it's just a question, when you're researching a provider or your provider has prescribed you something, you want to make sure and even ask the questions, ask them point blank and see the look on their face. But yeah, this is something you need to know because it's relevant to you deciding, do I want to take this medication or not?
Okay, that's really great advice. Thanks for that. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the other side of your passion, which is the fitness, strength training, right? So one of the reasons I think I found you through our mutual friend, Celine Yeager, and the Hip Play Not Pause. And I know you're an active part of that community. I feel like that community really looks towards, like the more endurance athletes and those that are a bit more serious athletically. I think I cover more of the general population and we all have our sort of niches. Mine are more the weekend warriors like me. Well, I feel like I'm a bit more than a weekend warrior, but regardless, so we all have different sort of niches, but I found you there through Celine, and I like the fact that you were talking my talk about how important it is to do our strength training. But I already came into menopause doing strength training. I already loved it. I was already a convertee or whatever. Like I was there. And it was only when I started researching for the book, I was like, oh my God, I'm so glad I'm here because I didn't realize how amazingly beneficial it was. And so did your passions already exist, or did you realize through the research, I better pick up some weights right now? I mean, how did it look for you?
Well, for me, I was, in 1985, I was 15. And that was the first time I stepped into a gym, to lift weights. And I was the only girl there. And the reason why I was able to do that is that my father was a semi-professional football player. And I was always an athlete, from the time I was 7, I played softball, I played various things. I wanted to play football myself, but I'm 5'4", 130 pounds. I wasn't going to be going anywhere fast there. But he said, look, if you're going to be an athlete, because my father was on the smaller side, especially for a football player. He said, to compensate for your size, he says, because you're not very big either, you need to get in the gym and you need to be as strong and resilient as you can be. And so he taught me that from the time I was a teenager. So I started getting in the gym at an age and a time where you didn't see teenage girls lifting weights, but they received me very well there, and I made some really good friends, and I've been into weightlifting since I was a teenager. So I was fortunate because
I'm the same. Hey, I'm the same. I didn't have a semi-professional father who was a football player. I did martial arts though, and they always encouraged that. So it was as a teenager, I always did it. And so, and I've only ever had positive experience in the gym space as well. So it breaks my heart when I hear that women don't. But I also understand why they're not all as confident as you and I going into the gym, right? So you're already going in through, I know you're a menopausal woman, right? So you're already strong and you're already healthy and fit going through menopause. But did you go into menopause, even with your education and even with your fitness knowledge, and struggle? Was it still hard for you?
Well, I can tell you the very first hot flash I had, I almost took myself to the emergency room because I thought I was septic. I didn't, honest to God, I was laying in bed one night. I was 41. I think I had my first hot flash, and I'm laying in bed, and all of a sudden this wave of heat, I start sweating, and I'm like, what the hell is happening? And I'm like, am I septic? Do I have an infection? Should I go to the emergency room? And then I took myself out of the situation emotionally and said, all right, if a patient came to you, what would you say? And I'm like, this is a hot flash. Maybe I just had my first hot flash. So even knowing, intellectually doing this for a living, it's scary the first time it happens. You might not necessarily pick up on what it is. About a year ago, I got this really strange migraine that I thought we
had this conversation.
Yes,
I remember. Yeah.
It was scary as hell because I'm seeing patients and there's this flashing light in my right visual field. And I'm trying to move my head, looking around it. I'm like, what the hell is this? And then it's getting worse. I'm like, oh my God, am I having a stroke? And then the headache came about an hour later, and then it dawned on me. I'm like, oh, this is a migraine. Okay, well, then chalk up one more thing that now I'm getting during menopause that I didn't have before.
That's too funny.
So yeah, it's a struggle for me too. I mean, I've almost taken myself to the hospital twice with these symptoms, and I'm supposed to know what they're all about. But
what you're doing. And the migraine actually was my very first symptom, although it didn't present to me as a migraine because I was the same. It's why you can probably explain to why it's the right side, but for me, I lost feeling in my right side of my face, then vision, and it felt like I had a claw over that right side of me. But then it ran down my arm. I think maybe my neck was stiff, so the ulnar nerve like made my arm go like clenched, and I couldn't feel anything. And then I fell over, and then I was being sick, and I never got a headache with it. So I was obviously one with aura, and I had them for 2 years, almost like they were chronic anyway. I had maybe 10 a month. And even my neurologist didn't go, oh, these are migraines. It was just crazy. And eventually we did work out that's what it was. And it was my very first attention into menopause. But what do we know why women in menopause get migraines? Because it seems very common. And can you explain the right side of the face? That's purely personal. I just want to know, why is it always the right side of the face? It seems that way when I talk to people.
Yeah, I don't know if it has to do with, we all have a dominant side of our brain. We're all, most people are right-handed. And so that means the left side of the brain is dominant. And so I don't know if that maybe potentially feeds into a bias toward migraines one side or the other. I'd have to ask a neurologist that. Yeah. I'm not sure about the right versus left, but the thing that causes the migraines, it's the same sort of dynamic that causes the hot flashes. It's vasomotor instability. And what that means is that the blood vessels, which are very estrogen responsive, they dilate and constrict a little. I don't want to say uncontrollably. That is something that's probably a little bit too dramatic, but kind of unexpectedly, because in perimenopause, when the symptoms are usually the worst, this enormous fluctuations in your hormones. And so when your blood vessels are expecting to receive hormonal messaging and it's receiving these messages that are chaotic, the blood vessels don't know what to do, right? They expand, they contract, they're kind of dysynchronous. And when that happens, you get these hot flashes. And migraines are vascular as well. And so I would suspect that physiology is overlapping between why you get hot flashes, why you get migraines. It's just these erratic patterns of hormones that are impacting the blood vessels, which are very hormone responsive.
Yeah. And, I'm 4 years post-menopause now, and I don't get them anymore. And they ruined my life for like 8 years. And it was awful. And because I couldn't take hormone therapy, I actually ended up using the most amazing drug. Like, I just wanted to tell everyone about it. It was called Jovi, and it was an injectable. And it was the only thing. I'd tried every migraine medication. Oh my God, it was so good. And then I moved back to Canada and I can't get it. So I'm just hoping I never get another migraine again. But yeah, that's so interesting because for example, that's a great sort of segue into what does perimenopause look like? Because I know when I've talked to women about this, most women think they're expecting to see a change in their cycle first, but that's not usually the first thing that appears to women. I mean, maybe their cycles got shorter and they haven't sort of noticed, but usually it's something that doesn't feel hormonal, right, that comes our way. And what type of things do you see?
I see everything from, along the spectrum. I've seen people that have had regular monthly periods that just stop. And then that's
I wish. Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah.
Well, my mother, who is 93 years old, okay, she described this is what her menopause looked like. She had periods right up until she was 52, and then it just stopped. But that sounds like a good thing, but the poor woman had hot flashes for 20 years to follow. She was one of those people who had those vasomotor symptoms for 2 decades. So you will see something
sucks.
like that. Oh, it does.
Your poor mom.
Oh my God. She's a trooper. They're finally gone. She's 93 and she can finally enjoy these years without hot flashes. But yeah, you'll see that. But more commonly, people will say, well, my cycles are getting shorter. I'm getting a period every 3 weeks now instead of every 4. And then that'll happen for a little bit. And then they might miss a period or 2. So if you're in early perimenopause, you start to see the cycle shorten. And then in mid perimenopause is when you might drop a cycle. And then in late perimenopause is when maybe you'll get 2 or 3 periods in a year. And then menopause, by definition, you have your final menstrual period. The year beyond that is the day you became menopausal. So there's a whole spectrum. And some people have no symptoms. Some people, their lives are falling apart. Some people have profound depression that can put them in the hospital. It's really, really, really profound, the variation that you see among women.
Yeah, it's a shared experience, but unique to everyone, right? I always say. And, there's a great organization in Boston, not far from you, called Women Living Better. I don't know if you're aware of the person who started the website. Her name is Nina Kozlov, and she is a researcher who was like, I'm really frustrated that there's not enough answers to the questions I've got about perimenopause. And of course, perimenopause doesn't have a ton of the research. And so she was like saying, when I've spoke to my friends have said that this happens and this happens. But when you go to your doctor and she's got access to like Fabian and all of the great doctors, they're like saying, no, we don't have the data to show that, but we don't have the data because we never studied it type thing, right? So Nina started doing almost like survey-based studies. She actually got an award from the North American Menopause Society for the work she's doing. She's a really great connection for you. But what ultimately one of her studies showed is that, some women like had got shorter cycles. Mine happened as soon as I had my last child. I was 38. I just went into a 21-day cycle and just assumed that was it at 38. But the few days before my period, every 21 days, I would get sick. I'd get a cold. I just feel really run down and very tired, like I couldn't go to the gym at all. And that's what they found in one of the studies, is that women were like, yeah, that happens to me too. But the doctor's like, yeah, it's nothing. And retrospectively, personally looking back, I think that the immune compromised type feelings I got at the end of those 21-day cycles were pretty common to a lot of women. And as soon as I got my period, I'd be like, yeah, I feel great again. It was like the craziest thing.
Yeah, that is crazy. That is crazy. And, thank God there are people like that doing work like that, because like you said, she's got this whole repository of symptoms that women have. You go to the doctor, they have their randomized controlled trials and can't see the world beyond that. And that again is the problem. Yeah. So thank goodness for people like her who are keeping track of it. And, maybe it's not level 1 placebo double-blinded evidence, but really, does it have to be? No. Take a survey, just talk to people.
Yeah, listen to women. That's what we're asking for. In fact, we're demanding it, aren't we? Like, for Christ's sake, just like put your hand up and listen to us, So just cycling back to the exercise thing. So you're an athlete, you love exercising, and you're strong and you're fast, and then you found CrossFit, right? So, and I know that when you do your workouts and when you do your newsletter, you always give like a little WOD, which is a workout of the day for those that don't know the CrossFit terminology. So how did you find that? When did you find that? How often do you go? Like, what does it look like?
So I found CrossFit on my 45th birthday. So I had been, a recreational athlete, young, at a young age. And then, of course, I went to medical school, did residency and fellowship. And so I was more of a gym rat during that time, whenever I could go, whenever I had maybe gotten more than 8 hours sleep in a night. And, but I wasn't quite as active that time. And then once I was in fellowship and got my life back again, I had my son, and then decided to start playing competitive tennis. About 2 weeks postpartum, I decided I'm going out on the tennis court and I'm going to learn. And then I learned, and then I started playing competitively with USTA clubs and stuff like that. And that was kind of fun.
Oh, hang on a minute. So you'd never played tennis before, and then you end up playing like a high, oh my God. And then you were playing at this high level.
Yeah, I was. My husband was a tennis player, recreationally. And so I'm like, well, this would be a good family thing to do. But then, because I'm very type A, I just took it to another place. And then it got to a point where there weren't a lot of women in my age group who played singles tennis. Everybody was playing doubles, and it was very social. And I'm like, you know what? I like to run around and I like to hit the ball hard, And so then my husband, who was my most formidable opponent, had shoulder surgery, and then he was out of commission. So I'm like, you know what? I got to find something else. Then I became a Les Mills body combat instructor. And that was really fun. I had a blast doing that. And I also became a body pump instructor. So now I'm 45. I had my son when I was 36. So this was about 10-year period of time. I said, I got to up my game. I got to do something. And right down the street from where I work was a CrossFit gym. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go. I'm going to go. I'm going to see what this is all about. And then I went, and I remember the first time I was in there, they had a WOD that was handstands and jump ropes. And I'm like, I haven't done this since I was maybe in elementary school. This is really interesting. And so I'm like, you know what? This is different. And then I got hooked, and then I loved it. And then they started recruiting, they being the CrossFit world, started recruiting physicians who do CrossFit. And that's how CrossFit Health was born. And so I was part of that initial initiative to recruit physicians who do CrossFit for the purpose of trying to bridge that gap between medicine and fitness. Who better to find than CrossFit athletes who are also doctors? So I'm still part of that organization today. And I've been doing CrossFit ever since. And so I do CrossFit 3 times a week. I have a coach. I haven't been to a CrossFit affiliate since COVID because my CrossFit affiliate closed. And then I was going to another one that I really liked, but I have a full-fledged gym in my basement. So then I just started just doing it on my own with my coach. And she's fabulous. And so I do that about 3 times a week. I'm also doing more endurance stuff because when I started CrossFit, I couldn't run a mile without stopping. Yeah. And I was really embarrassed by that because I thought I was a badass when I was coming into CrossFit. And then I tried to run a mile and realized that I wasn't. And so
I'm
like,
laughing.
okay.
I'd be like, I couldn't do a handstand, although I do like going upside down. But I would be more worried about doing a double under than like running a mile. Isn't that funny? But you think you can do it. And then you're like, oh, hang on.
Yeah. Right. It's true. And so I decided to, this was going to be how I'm going to, improve my fitness. I'm going to work on my weaknesses. And, to this day, I'm trying to be a better runner. I can run 5K now without stopping 7 years later. So I'm making some strides, but I am not an endurance athlete by any stretch, but I am trying to work on the things that
That's me, actually. I think we're twins, apart from I'm not a doctor, but they're same. Like my body shape and type is powerful and strong and fast. I can still sprint and do well with the kids, can keep up, and I can run a 5K, but God, I'm dead slow. Like I'm a half hour, I just plod along, and I don't want to be fast, but I've done half marathons and stuff, but it's never ever felt easy to me. And so I wondered actually, because during my own personal perimenopause time, I'm perfectly back to normal now with my exercise and stuff. But when I was going through perimenopause, it was really quite troublesome for me from a chronic fatigue standpoint. Not really symptoms. Obviously, the migraines would have me floored for days because you get them and then you have a hangover from them for like 2 or 3 days. Then I was too depressed to do anything, and then I was too tired. So I actually stayed quite strong and fit, but it was just by doing like little bits every day. I just couldn't face doing big workouts. And so I had to definitely make accommodations. And I'm glad I kept doing little things every day, because it meant that when I started to feel better, like I kept the base level there. And it matters now. But did you experience that? Did you have to like pull back or accommodate? And how do you do that in somewhere like CrossFit, where I feel like everyone's like so gung-ho? How do you go from doing a handstand push-up to going, oh, I can't do that today? I mean, what does that look like?
Yeah, I actually had some really big shoulder issues. It was around the time of COVID, and I was doing all Zoom visits from home. And so for some reason, I don't know if it was just having my hands on a keyboard and having my shoulder in one position for 8 hours a day,
As a doctor, you mean? That's what we're talking about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
As a physician, I spend my days seeing patients, and I was thinking, well, maybe my shoulder's. I got to a point where I couldn't do a push-up. Now, push-ups, that's a strong suit of mine. Push-ups, pull-ups, body weight stuffs, box jumps, that stuff I can do, and I can do it well. But I couldn't even do a strict push-up. And oh my God, it made me so sad, because that was one of my discriminators as an athlete in this age group, is that I can do these things. And it really made me so sad and depressed that, oh my God, why can't I do this? So I didn't even think about it being menopausal. I just chalked it up to, shoulder freezing, because I'm in the same position all day doing Zoom, seeing patients. So my coach said, look, it's like you have to learn how to walk again. You have to go back to pain-free movement. And I also looked at Kelly Starrett's The Ready State, that mobility program that he has for, all types of joints and muscle issues is phenomenal. I signed on to that. I got a membership and really learned how to work my shoulder, strengthen my rotator cuff muscles, and my coach helped me to move better again. I kind of had to reteach myself how to do a push-up. And then I stuck with it. I was patient. And now they're stronger than they ever were because I took the time to think about it. So, I did that all in the privacy of my own home. That would have been harder to do if I was in a group setting because, you have a class to run and you have just so much time. But at home, I could really focus 20 minutes on just warming up my shoulder, where you can't really do that in a class setting. So yeah, I did have that struggle, but being patient and looking at it objectively was the key to me making progress. And thank goodness I'm back. My shoulders have never been stronger.
Isn't that amazing that we are hearing this? And it's like for me, I'm hearing about, like, I had Achilles tendonitis for like a year. It took me, I think I complained to you as well. Like, why? Because I've never been injured before. And you would say, well, I've got this shoulder thing and I'd never been injured before. But I'm hearing about Achilles, knee and shoulder stuff happening to women, like sort of around this time as well. It's not unusual to hear this. And is that down to maybe the fluctuating hormones and its protective elements as well?
There's a few reasons for this. One is that the character of tendons and ligaments changes during perimenopause and menopause because tendons and ligaments have estrogen receptors too. And receptors are basically the things that receive the signal. It's like the antennae. The estrogen comes in, the antennae goes off. It's like, okay, and the estrogen sends a message to the tendon or ligament to, do X, Y, Z. So the character, it's like an elastic band. This is the best analogy I can use. So think about an elastic band. You buy it from the store and you take it out of the package and it's nice and stretchy and fun. And then say you leave it outside on the sidewalk in the hot sun for an hour. You go back and pick up that elastic band. It's not so stretchy and fun. It breaks. And so that's what happens when the estrogen goes away. Our nice, stretchy and fun tendons and ligaments don't behave the same way. And in those tendons and ligaments, we also have pain receptors. And pain perception also is estrogen driven, among other things. There's opiates and there's a million other chemicals, but estrogen plays a role. And so pain perception changes, the character of our joints and of our tendons and ligaments change. And also we're losing muscle mass. So the shoulder, so common for like a 60, 70-year-old woman to just fall and, tear her rotator cuff because those muscles of the shoulder have started to atrophy. So we have to pay so much more attention to building those muscles to stabilize the joints because we've got this thing going on with the low estrogen and the tendons and ligaments changing. So yeah, it's a thing. It's a real thing. And there's a lot of components to it.
Yeah, that's really great. It's good to hear that because I think that's sort of, when you know that, it's like, we just put blame on ourselves. I'm like, oh God, why? It's me, my body's let me down and blah, blah, blah. And the fact is if we know that this is potentially an issue, then, and I'm a huge fan of promoting rest and mobility work and, working on like strengthening. I do tons of band work as well for my joints and stuff. And I know you do too. And I think that that's one of the things I'd love women to do as well is 1, move more, 2, do more strength training. And I love that you say you only do 3 times a week because that's sort of what you need to be looking at, right? Mm-hmm. And then the last one is just work on mobility and be okay resting. And enjoy the days off.
Yeah, and I think yoga is very important too. I love yoga. I just did some yoga this morning because I blasted my legs in squats a few days ago and I'm having trouble actually using my legs today. So I said, you know what? I can't really do box jumps today. So I'm going to do some power yoga. And it was the best thing I did. But, the mindset's also key too. I could have very easily said to myself when I hurt my shoulder, it's like, okay, I'm menopausal. This is the end. They're never going to come back. This is blah, blah. It's not true. It is not the end. It's a detour. And what you just need to do is approach it differently. You might have to learn how to walk all over again. You might have to learn how to do push-ups all over again. But it's possible to get back to where you were and even in a better place because you will learn how to move better. You will take better care of your joints and ligaments. You will take better care of your muscles. So the big thing is don't get discouraged that this is the end. It's not. You just have to approach it differently. And then once you get back on track, the sky's the limit.
Yeah. Oh my God, that's such wonderful. I actually was going to ask for some advice, but I like to end with, but I actually feel like that's it. And I think the key, like you said there, is it's a transition, it's a detour. And I think it's Celine's words that I copy all the time, where she says there's a light at the end of the tunnel. It's not a cave. There's all these analogies. And we're sort of like showing women that it's possible, right? We're sort of living, breathing and in it ourselves. And I know there was a time, Carla, when I was like, am I always going to be like this? I'm sure you were with your shoulder. I was with my Achilles. I was with, whatever symptoms, thinking, is this how I'm going to wake up every day? And I know it can be demoralizing, but the message is, this is a detour. Stick with it.
Absolutely. Without a doubt.
So Carla, where can everyone find you? I want you to talk about like where we can find you, but talk a bit about athletic aging, because for the people who are listening to this podcast, I think they should all sign up. And I know I talk about you all the time on Instagram and you go, yeah, I just got a whole lot of people signed up again, because I find it really valuable, right?
It's so true. It's so funny. It's like when I start seeing upticks in my Instagram followers, I'm like, oh my God, Amanda must have said something to her people. But anyway, athletic aging. So you can find it at athleticaging.blog. So it's all one word, .blog. And just another piece of athletic aging that I want to highlight too, that segues from what we were just talking about, is I do this thing called the Inspirational Stories series, because I really want women to know that, no, this is not the end. And so these are real stories from real women that I've come across who are over 50 and they have either never been competitive before and now they're triathletes. I had Beth Birch. She is an 81-year-old current triathlete. She's done somewhere over 100 triathlons and she's still doing it. I met her up in Maine when I was doing a talk up there. So I do this Inspirational Stories series every quarter or so, just bringing to light what some of these amazing women are doing and what they're regular people just like us, and anyone can relate to them.
I love that.
Yeah. So I do that. And of course, the workout of the week, I'm a CrossFit trainer. So I have training in programming workouts. And so I cater these workouts to midlife women. Like my last one was on plyometrics and how important that is for bone health. Every week kind of has a theme. And I try to bring it back to, well, why is this particular workout good for someone going through this stage of life? So that comes out every Monday. Every other Thursday could be a mixed bag. It could be inspirational stories. It could be review of the medical literature. It could be something I'm just inspired by myself. I just wrote a piece on my journey with wearable technology. It's kind of funny just how I came about to use a Whoop strap when I, barely got rid of my BlackBerry when the iPhone 6 had come out. So I'm not a very tech-savvy person.
I know. I like that newsletter. It was really funny. Yeah.
So it's a mixed bag. So yeah, lots of stuff relevant, to create practical solutions for people, give them some workouts to do every week.
Although I don't know where you find the time literally to do it all. I mean, I don't. It's crazy, but I do appreciate that you find it.
Yeah, it's all about scheduling. I'm thankfully in a stage of my career now where I have flexibility in my schedule. I'm no longer on call overnight in a hospital. I don't do 36-hour shifts anymore. My son is a teenager. He can help me with the tech, thank goodness. So, I'm not chasing around a young child anymore. So I'm in a stage of my life where I have a little more time.
Yeah, and we appreciate it. And I appreciate you coming on to the podcast. Thank you very much, Carla. And yeah, just keep doing what you're doing, because I'm glad more people are finding you. And I just find your stuff so helpful.
Oh, thank you, Amanda. As always, great to be with you.
Okay, take care. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to the show. If you like what you hear, then why not subscribe to this podcast and leave me a review? You see, when you do this, it helps to raise the profile of my show and attract new listeners. And it also allows me to continue to deliver valuable content with great guests. And in return for you doing that, I will send you my 12-week core-focused program called Abs on Fire as a thank you. Simply drop me an email at amanda@amandathebe.com and I'll wing that your way. Bye.